Hi, friends. Susan Blackwell from the Spark File here to let you know that the doors are open for the Spark File Illume, a 9-month group creativity coaching mastermind that invites you to be the Chief Creative Officer and Chief Marketing Officer of your creativity. But what does that mean? That means in 9 months in Illume, you will clarify and advance your big creative goals and learn how to effectively share your work with the world. Now, if you're listening to this and you're an experienced creative or an accomplished professional who seeks a space where it is safe to attempt something you've never tried before, or complete a big creative project, or take your work to the next level and acquire the skills needed to share your creative work with the world, Illume might be right for you. We are calling in emotionally intelligent, high-functioning creatives who are ready to level up. You can find out more by going to thesparkfile.com/Illume, but do it now to find out if Illume is right for you and to save with early bird discounts. That's thesparkfile.com/Illume. Take a leap, take a risk. Go to thesparkfile.com/Illume and join us for Illume.
The Sparkfile podcast may contain profanity and other adult content.
Please use your discretion.
When I bump into something that inspires me, I dump it in my spark file. Could be something that I want to make or how I want to be. I pump it in my spark file. I jump into my spark file. Let's open up the spark file.
Welcome to the Spark File, where we believe that everyone is creative, but smart creative people don't go it alone.
I'm Laura Camion.
And I'm Susan Blackwell, and we are creativity coaches who help people fear less, create more, and bring their creative visions to life.
If you're an OG member of the Sparkfile community, welcome back, Sparkler.
If you're joining us for the first time, well, welcome, you friend.
Welcome. Know that just by listening to this podcast, you are joining a warm and wonderful clan of creatives.
You also may be asking yourself, what exactly is a Spark File?
A Spark File is a place where you consistently collect all of your inspirations and fascinations.
If you're like us and you're making stuff all the time, or you want to be making stuff all the time, you know, if you're not careful, your campfire of creativity can flicker out.
But don't despair. We are collecting kindling in the form of fresh ideas, images, and inspiration that spark creativity and pique curiosity.
To light a fire under our collective asses to make things like this podcast.
Or a statement of apology that makes everything better and then some.
I already love this episode. I'm already obsessed.
Every episode, we're going to reach into our spark files and exchange some sparks. And from time to time, we're going to talk to some folks who spark us too.
That means we have more sparks than we can possibly use in this lifetime.
So if something lights you up, we encourage you to take that thing and make something out of it.
Without further ado, let's open up
The
Spark File.
The Spark File.
Camion. You know, I'm already obsessed. I'm
so excited.
I'm excited. I'm a little nervous. The amount of time I've given thought to apologizing thoughtfully.
Girl, you do it thoughtfully.
Well,
you do.
I appreciate that, but I am so into this. Before we launch into your sparkly spark,
yes,
I would just love to take a moment to share this beautiful email that we received from a listener named Eric. This just in. Eric writes, "Hi, Susan and Laura. I just listened to the Creative Comfort Crisis episode and I want to thank you. I've been meaning to take a dance class for a while, and now I believe I can handle the discomfort of it."
Yeah, Eric.
Bless. I wonder what kind of dance Eric wants to
Eric,
take.
tell us more.
Yeah, tap, modern floor work,
tango.
I tried to talk Nathan into, I was like, what if we took these online pre-recorded video dance classes so that we could learn how to do, but the ones that I sort of shared with him, they almost they were like a very heteronormative
We're going to follow the man
flavor.
here.
Yeah. And he was like, that feels like a live, laugh, love sign to me.
Oh.
And I'm into this, but I might need different teachers.
Yeah.
So I'm with you, Eric. This is thrilling.
Tell me more about Eric.
Okay. Eric says, I also wanted to share a quick story since you mentioned improv. Oh, Eric. I've taken 3 improv classes. Good on you, Eric.
Yeah.
But I'm
Eric.
still relatively a beginner. When I showed up at my local improv theater for a jam, aka an open practice, I discovered that the jam was a musical improv jam, meaning that we'd have to improvise songs. I'm not trained at all in singing, and I don't like to sing in front of others. I took a deep breath and put my name on the list for the jam.
Oh, yes.
Eric says, let me tell you, it was the best night of my year so far. It was not the best night because I performed well. It was not the best night because I was funny. It was the best because I did it.
Woo!
I stretched my boundary a little farther that night, and I'm going back next music improv jam.
Oh,
Gratefully,
my God.
Eric.
I want to clap, and I'm so aware that clapping into my microphone would not be pleasant for anyone, but I'm so excited.
Eric, that email. It's beautiful. It's a beautifully written email. So good job.
It's a beautifully written email, but incredibly beautiful sentiment behind it all.
Isn't it great?
Wow.
I have such great admiration for anybody, knowing my own apprehensions and fears around improv specifically. And then to just like swing for the fences, Eric, and do the musical improv jamboree. Like, that is good job.
I mean, talk about take it and make it.
Let's all be like Eric.
Let's all be like Eric.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's very inspiring and so exciting.
I think Eric's going to have a great 2023.
It's off to a great start. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm so psyched. Thanks for sharing that.
Thank you for writing it. Thank you for sharing it. Thank you for living it, Eric.
Woo!
Beautiful.
Living it.
Oh, now back to you, baby Cams.
Oh my God, I got a big old smile on my face. I'm not sure I can even speak.
I know.
God, that's good. Okay. Well, maybe today's episode will spark a few people to do some things. Let's get into it, shall we?
Let's get into it.
All right, Suze, have you ever heard of the olive oil company Graza?
I have not.
Oh, okay. Well, let me tell you something. I only learned about them recently, and I only learned about them because of a fuck up, you might say, because of a mistake or mistakes that they made that they needed to apologize for. And now, spoiler alert, I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan. So here's a little bit about Graza. By the way, I learned all of this from a January 2023 article in the Washington Post by Ben Cohen.
Okay.
So Graza is an olive oil company. That is it. That is all they do. They're 1 year old. They're a startup.
Oh, yeah.
That has turned squeezable bottles of extra virgin olive oil into like the best thing since sliced bread. Squeezable bottles of olive oil, Suze. Why hadn't anyone thought of this before? Crazy.
So it's like a plastic squeezable instead of a glass.
Instead of this glass, and always they're tall and thin and hardly hold anything. These are squeezable bottles. Okay. Andrew Bennon is the founder of Graza Olive Oil. He's 30 years old. That's right. 30. He spent his 20s working for brands like Warby Parker and Casper. And at the same time, he was apprenticing in like Michelin-starred New York City restaurant kitchens. He never imagined getting into the olive oil business, except during the pandemic, he lived with his wife's family in Spain and apparently during that time became obsessed with olive oil.
Sure.
And the more that Benin dove into the world of olive oil, he found that there were so many snobby, overpriced olive oils. And then on the other end of the spectrum, really cheap olive oils, low quality olive oils. And he wanted to find a sweet spot between like flavor and affordability.
Mm-hmm.
So, according to the Graza website, most olive oils in the US are blended from old, meaning not fresh, low quality oils. Like they'll say it's made in Italy, but it's actually blended with other cheaper oils from around the world. And then they put the Italy label on it.
Right.
So they are promoting it based on, like, ooh, these are olives from Italy, but probably it's mixed with a whole bunch of other stuff.
And also, yes, counterfeit food as well. So it's like it's not like low grade olive oil from other locations. It can be all sorts of oils
of any kind. Yeah.
That's right.
Exactly. And then on the other end of the spectrum, there's these super fancy olive oils that it feels like you can't or shouldn't use them every day. They're like special occasion olive oils.
Right.
Graza olive oils are picked, pressed, bottled, and shipped all in the same season. So super fresh, same season, and they put the harvest date right on the bottle. They are never ever blended with other oils. Again, according to their website, real extra virgin olive oil is made from olives that are harvested early fall or winter and pressed as soon as possible so the oil stays fresh, delicious, and full of polyphenols. Those are the healthy things, the healthy stuff that makes you live a long time. Most bottles that are labeled extra virgin aren't the real deal, but Graza is and always will be, as they say on their website. And again, they come in squeezable bottles and they cost like $15 to $20 per bottle. It's not super cheap, but it's also not super snobby.
Not $30 a bottle for like a little tiny glass
For a
bottle.
little thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So they're making high quality olive oil accessible, essentially. And they don't have a million different kinds, Suze. They have two. They have sizzle and they have drizzle.
Oh, smart.
Sizzle and drizzle. So sizzle is for cooking with, heating up in a pan.
Yeah.
Drizzle is for use on salads and popcorn and anything else you might drizzle your olive oil over.
Mm-hmm.
It's simple, it's clear, accessible. I love the messaging on that. It's just like, it's delightful. I'm like, sizzle, drizzle. I know what to do here. It was apparently clear to everyone that this was a genius idea, all of it, because they opened for business in January of last year. And within the first week, Susan, the first week, Whole Foods called them.
Oh.
And I like that. It's very specific. They didn't call Whole Foods. Whole Foods called them within their first week.
Wow.
Then they were in Food and Wine and Bon Appetit, and everyone on Instagram was going crazy for them. Now their olive oils are sold in stores across the country as well as on the Graza website.
Oh my God. I'm just like, what did they do?
Well,
what did they do?
Benin spends like 8 months a year now in Spain, overseeing the farming, picking, pressing, and bottling, and the rest of the year in Brooklyn. And everything was
I knew it was
out.
Brooklyn. When you were like a combination between Michelin star restaurants and working at Warby Parker and Casper. I was like, I smell Brooklyn all over this guy.
He's Brooklyn. He's totally Brooklyn.
Due respect to Brooklyn. Yes.
Mm-hmm. So everything was working out perfectly until the dreaded until. So what had happened was Graza was going gangbusters all year. Their first year, no complaints at all. But then came their very first holiday season. The orders came in faster than they could keep up with after the olive oils were featured in tons of gift guides around the country. They had customers that had ordered sets, like gift sets, and they thought they'd get, for example, like 3 sets of 2 bottles that they would gift to people, a sizzle and a drizzle, right?
Sure.
But instead, what they got was like a box with 6 bottles just bouncing around loose in a box. They were
Oh, boy.
dented and the logos were peeling. And then after a blizzard, as we recall, the great blizzard of the holiday season last year, most of those gifts didn't make it in time for the holidays. And as far as corporate crises go, this wasn't the worst ever, right? I'm not describing like a scandal here.
Yeah, but it really does. It makes people real mad when something that they thought they were going to gift, when it's time sensitive.
That's right. So Benin was not proud of how his company had done in their first holiday season. So he did something that most companies try to avoid doing publicly, if at all possible. He took responsibility. He and he alone, that's the crazy part we'll come back to, but he alone drafted an apology to the 35,000 customers who had ordered from their website like in the past 60 days. And according to the Washington Post article, Benin wrote the apology letter in a couple of hours. He didn't proofread it, he didn't run it through legal. And I just want to offer just a little splash of context here. I have done my fair share of corporate communications, internal and external, now in the entertainment and education sectors, shall we say. But still, to send an apology letter to all of your customers is highly unusual. To send a heartfelt, truly apologetic letter that takes full responsibility without it going through a board or a steering committee and usually a team of lawyers, no fucking way. No, you just don't do it.
Yeah.
But that is exactly what Benin did. And according to the Washington Post, the mea culpa from a 1-year-old company with the subject line, learning from our mistakes, was just about the opposite of a typical corporate response. It explained in plain English and candid detail what went wrong and why. It took accountability for those errors and it offered a discount on future orders. It was raw, transparent about uncertainty and messy with typos and misspellings.
Wow.
It was also, right? It was also, the Washington Post says, oddly entertaining and strangely charming.
Huh.
So at this point in the article, I was, number one, sparked by the olive oil company and their products. Do I need to say them again? Sizzle and drizzle in squeezable bottles. What? And number two, I was riveted by the idea of this apology letter. I mean, what had he said and done that was so different that it was worthy of its own media coverage? I'm reading an article about a positive apology letter. What? Like, this is crazy media coverage. And then number three, I had to know, how had his customers responded? So first, what did he write in the letter? Okay, first of all, the letter sounded like a human being. Like, it sounded like a person. It had typos and conversational language, which, while would not be recommended by a team of lawyers, actually made people trust him more. Bottom line, it felt authentic. And you know I'm a big fan of that. He told the truth, Suze. He told the truth. They had not lived up to the expectations of their customers or to their own expectations. Number three, he listed all of the categories of complaints in a short blurb elaborating on the problems. He did not let the fact that some of the customers who would get this email didn't have any problems. And so by sending it to everybody, he was actually disclosing problems to them that they hadn't even been aware of.
Yeah.
But he seemed driven to try to send something that was as close to sending individual handwritten notes as possible. So by naming all of the problems specifically, he helped people realize that they had been heard. He was literally mirroring back to people, what I've heard you say is, the labels were peeling, the bottles were leaking. Then he promised to do better, and he offered to make it up to people at a cost to his own business. According to the Washington Post article, the most effective apologies come with a financial cost. says Ben Ho, for corporations at least.
Yeah.
Ben Ho, a Vassar College economics professor. In one experiment studying customer behavior after millions of late Uber arrivals, he found that riders preferred $5 coupons without apologies to apologies without compensation. Money literally helps buy forgiveness. But there was something different about Mr. Bennon's offer. He didn't round up to $5. He offered a discount of the exact amount the company could afford to offer. Remember, they're still a startup. He offered $4.43 off per bottle, and he said, that is all we can afford. Somehow, by going with the lesser but super specific number, he actually gained more trust with customers. Oh, and he did something that totally pissed off his marketing department. He left out the company's website. There was no link to it, no pushing through. And he says that was intentional. He felt that like dropping the link in would only make it feel like a sales letter. And I'm sure he's right. I'm totally sure he's right.
Also, though, if you don't drop the link in, it's an extra step for somebody to go back on the website and get their $4.44 discount.
It's true. You could argue that it makes it easier for them, but he was like, he felt adamant. Nope, I'm not linking to it. So how did his customers react to his apology letter?
Get him!
Get him! Apparently, he got replies from nearly 1,000 customers. I mean, that's weird, just replying to what seems like an automated email. But almost immediately, they started coming in. And according to the Washington Post, they said things like, thanks for your honesty. I wish more businesses did the same. And I won't be using the discount, but I will be reordering. So, in short, by being a true human, mistakes and all, and owning what was their responsibility, Benin won back customers and gained many more. Like, the crazy thing about this is that the writer of the piece in the Washington Post had been a customer and one of the disappointed ones. Like, he was like, I'm not happy with this. He had ordered gifts for the holidays that arrived with oil leaking from the bottles, no gift packaging, etc. But after the apology email he received, he was even more of a fan. And he says the very next time he went to the store, he came home with more bottles of Graza. And then he wrote about it, and people like me became fans. I hadn't even heard of them before.
Right. Wow.
It's amazing that a memorable, true apology can leave a company in a better position than before it had reason to apologize. And of course, the same can be true of relationships, personal and professional. Marjorie Engel, the co-author of the new book, Sorry, 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 has written... Stop right there, folks. Stop right there.
It's fantastic. That's really good.
Marjorie Engel has written about apologies for a decade now on the blog that I am now obsessed with called Sorry Watch. Marjorie Engel says the rules for an effective, appropriate apology are the same for everyone, adults, children, corporations. Number 1, say you're sorry for what you did. Number 2, show you understand why it was bad. Number 3, only explain if you need to. Do not make excuses. Number 4, say why it won't happen again. Number 5, offer to make up for it. Now, on mindful.org, they have only 3 qualifications for a sincere apology, but they're very, very similar. Mindful.org says a high quality apology, number 1, accepts responsibility for the wrong and doesn't even hint that outside forces or the victim, anything else caused the offender to do what they did. Number 2, it's unqualified. If the apology contains a but, it fails. There is a time later, after the injury has had time to heal, to bring up any qualifications that might be relevant for future interactions. And number 3, it offers to make amends, such as offering to help someone you previously blew off or making a sincere effort to avoid the transgression in the future. It's so simple, right? But why does it feel so hard to get an apology and sometimes to give an apology. Well, according to ideas.ted.com, for some people, admitting wrongdoing and offering an apology is too psychologically threatening.
Mm,
Offering an apology implies that they have harmed another person in some way, which can elicit feelings of shame.
mm, yeah.
So there's a couple of categories it can fall into, but people who can't apologize often have such deep feelings of low self-worth that their fragile egos cannot absorb the blow of admitting they were wrong. So their defense mechanisms kick in, sometimes unconsciously, and they may externalize any blame and even dispute basic facts in order to ward off the threat of having to lower themselves by offering an apology. Another reason apologizing is hard is because it can be hell on your self-image. If you believe yourself to be a decent, caring, sensitive, moral person, having to apologize means admitting you are not what you say you are or believe yourself to be, when really, even decent, caring, sensitive, moral people make mistakes. It's just a mistake. It doesn't mean that you aren't those things. But then, of course, there's narcissism or a lack of empathy that keeps a person from being able to imagine another person's hurt. I think all of this is so fascinating. I mean, obviously, in regard to interpersonal relationships, but also as creatives, like in regard to character development, when we write stories, for example, and a character gets defensive or will not admit blame or apologize, it might not be because they're an asshole, although that is an option, but it can also be because it's too scary. They're too fragile emotionally. And it's not because they don't care, it's because they care a whole lot and they just can't admit that they fucked up something that they care a lot about. Like it might hit upon an area that they take great amount of pride in and they cannot admit to a mistake in that area. Before we go any further, Suze, I just thought I would pause here and chit chat a little bit and ask you a couple of questions. Have you ever had an apology that you wish would come but never did? Or it did come but it was disappointing in some way? Or have you ever had a hard time apologizing for something? Just what are your thoughts about these apologies? Because I know you've given apologies a lot of thought.
I have given apologies a lot of thought. I've studied on this a bit, and I like hearing these other sort of like, here's a framework, here's a framework. I do enjoy hearing that. And of course, I hold up significant apologies that I have offered to people, and I'm like, I wonder if I did it well enough. I wonder if I did it according to those frameworks or not.
Of course, yeah.
But I think about, yes, there are times when there are apologies that I wish would have come that never did. And sometimes I think it's because the person is in so much of their own pain that they can't see anything or feel anything
Yeah.
but their own pain. And so they certainly can't get through that forest to be like, oh, somebody else might be in pain. It's a hypothesis.
Yeah.
And then I just want to, where my mind also goes is, I'll keep this a blind item, but I have a really, really cherished friend who I inadvertently fucked up with.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that I fucked up is this. I don't say this as an excuse. I just say it by way of explanation. When we were growing up, I never really learned to do things like write thank you notes, respond to RSVPs, like all these sort of like social customs and niceties.
Yeah.
I never saw my parents do it. They never impressed it upon us. I have friends who have kids who are like, when the kid receives a gift, they're like, sit your ass down and write the thank you note right now.
That's right.
And
Yeah.
I just never learned that.
Yeah.
And it's something I have carried into my adulthood. Like I really have to make a conscious effort to remember thank you notes. And also, I'm ashamed to admit this, to RSVP to things.
Mm-hmm.
And especially if I'm declining,
Yes.
I'll get these beautiful, like very,
Yeah.
very thoughtful invitations. And I sometimes because of social anxiety, sometimes because I want to be in all places all the time. And so I fail all of it. But like
Right.
in any event, this person invited me to their wedding, their very small, very intimate wedding. And I never RSVP'd.
Oh.
And the next time I saw that person some months later, they were really angry, rightfully so.
Mm.
And, you know, they had been at my wedding and, you know, really been an active part of my wedding. And I just really fucked up. And they were really mad. And I owned it and apologized and tried to impress upon them how important they were in my life and that I really fucked up and that my lack of response was not an indicator of how I feel about them and their importance in my life and in my heart. And they accepted my apology.
Oh.
And we were this was years and years and years and years and years ago.
Yeah.
And I've tried to learn from that and get better
Yeah.
about responding to invitations and things like that. And I probably still fuck up. But then I was having a conversation with them years later, and it was just the two of us. And I could cry right now thinking about this,
Oh.
to be able to say to them all these years later, decades into our friendship, to say how thankful and how grateful I am to them that they had the grace to accept my apology.
Mm.
Because I've also made really, really sincere apologies to people that they have not accepted,
Mm-hmm.
that they
Yeah.
have been hurt to the point where and it's so, I feel embarrassed and a little bit ashamed even saying this because it's like, yeah, I'm one of those people. I think of myself as being like quite like a thoughtful, sensitive person.
Yes.
And with all that, one can still do things
That's right.
that I wouldn't even call it a fuck up, but one can make choices, conscious choices that really clash with someone else and it can really hurt them. And so I regret to inform all you listeners that I am someone who has hurt people to the extent that they have not accepted my apology. And that has been excruciating. And I've had to learn to live with that.
Suze, I have to say, ditto. I'm the same. And I wonder, is there any person among us who couldn't say that same thing, that they have fucked up and that there are people who have not forgiven them for those fuck ups? Like I'm hard pressed to think of a human being on this earth that wouldn't be true about. Except maybe the people who never apologize. And maybe they're like, I never did apologize.
Yeah.
It's on them. You know what I mean? And don't take responsibility. But for the rest of us, all we can do is try to apologize thoughtfully and sincerely and with authenticity.
Yeah.
And then it's out of our hands. And like you said, like try to do better the next time so that we don't keep repeating that. But I think in that story, Suze, I've probably got 10 of those.
Yeah.
Non-RSVPs on days that were important to other people.
Yeah.
And what feels accurate to me that is not an excuse because it's 100% on me. The fact that I don't want the answer to be no, I can't come. And so I avoid sending the answer, no, I can't come.
Yeah.
I want somehow like something is going to intervene and it's going to change my travel schedule and it's going to change my financial situation. It's going to change my availability for that weekend. And somehow suddenly I'll be able to go. Wouldn't that be great?
Right.
And so avoid. And now it's too late to send the RSVP because the wedding's tomorrow. And now I'm a terrible person.
Yeah.
And it has nothing to do with not wanting to be there. It has to do with wanting to be there.
When that happened, and I could say this in all sincerity and honesty to my friend, I told her, I saved your invitation in my scrapbook.
Oh,
I failed to RSVP to it, but
yeah.
it was so beautiful. And it was obviously a very important day in her life. And
Uh-huh.
I saved it. I saved her invitation in my scrapbook even before I knew that she had gotten really, really angry. So that makes sense to me, that thing that you're saying about, I don't want it to be true that I have to say no to you.
Yeah.
And I think if I'm honest with myself, there's that part of me, that people pleasing part of me that's just like, oh, I don't want them to be like, oh, Susan can't come. But I'll tell you, that is a far sight better than not responding at all.
Oh, Susan never told me whether or not she could come. That's a different feeling. But either way, you didn't want to cause any kind of negative feeling in your friend, and ended up, by trying to avoid that, ended up making it bigger. Yeah.
There's something that you just said as well that I think is super important, whether the party accepts the apology or does not,
Mhm.
whether they accept the apology or they don't. I think a critical piece of this is, what do we make of it? Like taking learning
Mhm.
from a painful situation like that
Mhm.
and incorporating the learning into one's life.
Mhm.
Now, there are things that, learnings like that we're incorporating into our life right now. We've talked about it as recently as this week. And then there are things that I think it's like a longer arc of understanding,
Mhm.
situations that are years old that I am still consciously working to understand my part in it so that I can do better by knowing better.
Mhm. Mhm.
And then if I'm honest, I think there are times when I'm like, some of this has nothing to do with me.
When I look back over my life, certainly there are a ton of situations that I'm fully responsible for. There are others that I think I spent years attempting to fix,
Yeah.
attempting to somehow be different, do different, to please a person, only to realize, like, years into it, like, oh, this was not mine to carry. This was not
Yeah.
my burden to bear. And I just dedicated years to it. And I'd like those years back.
Mm-hmm.
All of that is the people pleaser in us. It's all of the, like, I'm somehow responsible for every bad thing that happens. I know for me that goes all the way back to being a child of a narcissist. And it's like, someone in the room is upset and it must be something I've done. I must be able to fix it. And it's like, no, that person barely knows you, and the what they're going through today doesn't have anything to do with you. But it doesn't matter. I would take that on anyway somehow, and be convinced that I could do something to fix it.
Right.
So it is such an interesting thing, because there's apology and there's forgiveness, and they are two different things.
They are two different things. And all we have control over in a situation like that is our part of it. Like if I'm the apologizing party, that's all that I can control. And how somebody receives it or deflects it or doesn't respond to it or gets angrier because of it, like that is, we can't control that, and vice versa.
That's right. And I have had pathetic apologies, like a terrible, terrible apology.
You've written about bad apologies. I feel like in Echo Speaks, there's an apology that's sort of like, I'm sorry you feel that way. Like, I'm sorry you felt that way.
You know what that is? That line is like, she's learned that there are ways of apologizing without ever admitting she was wrong.
There you go.
And this is like somehow part of her evolution of like, oh, you can do that. You can say, I'm sorry you feel that way.
That old workaround.
That old workaround, which
Yeah.
is something. And again, that show has a lot to do with being a child of a narcissist and this realization of these subtle wordplay that is manipulative. And I learned it from a narcissist. And then, of course, I'm like, no, you can't do that. That is not who you want to be, and
Right.
not how you want to live. But I did have a terrible apology from probably like the worst relationship of my life, but I learned a lot from it, but it was just miserable. And eventually the apology came that was just a non-apology. But I believe they were apologizing.
The non-apology
It
apology.
was just like, oh my God. Speaking of narcissists. But I was like, okay. So speaking of those, like forgiveness could be its own spark because it is something else. And I decided like, oh, this was part of a growing up process for me, realizing like, A, I can acknowledge this apology was lame. B, I can still decide I'm going to forgive this person. And I'm forgiving this person really for me because I just don't want to carry this around. And I can forgive this person. And that also doesn't mean that they get access to me and my life.
100%.
And that was like the biggest gift and the most wonderful thing that I could be like, oh my gosh, I'm not carrying anything around from this except the learning, obviously, of the learning that I want to keep from that experience. I think people are like, well, forgiveness needs to look this way. Then you let that person back in to the spot in your life, where they want to be. Like, no, I can forgive you.
Now you
and
can
that
bless
there's no
and
vacancy.
release.
Yes, that's right. The second part, release. But it's so interesting to me. Apologies, forgiveness. This website that I mentioned earlier, Suze, Sorry Watch.
Yeah.
It is an incredible source of sparks. You know how I said to you the other day that I was like, well, I was almost done with my spark and then I fell down this rabbit hole.
Yes, this was the rabbit hole.
They analyze apologies in the media, from history, literature, celebrities, all of it. And I went down such a deep hole on it. I've barely even cracked the surface. I can't even with this site. But what they'll do is like publish apologies, annotate them, literally take them sentence by sentence and spell out what the person was trying to do here, how they're trying to manipulate or avoid blame, and all the ways the apology goes wrong. They have everything you could ever imagine about apologies and every type of apology. The categories, Suze, just to highlight a few. They have historical apologies, academic apologies, true crime apologies, personal apologies, sports apologies, corporate apologies, fashion, bro-apologies, which is really cute. She's got like the essentials of a good apology. She has apology bingo. Seriously, apology bingo. Phrases you can listen for in terrible apologies and play a game of bingo. Phrases like, I'm sorry if, actually, not my intention, the allegations against me, to anyone who was offended, if it sounded like, if I crossed the line. Like these phrases that come up over and over again when someone isn't truly taking responsibility.
Yeah.
One of the interesting things she writes about is the need to use the word apologize rather than regret, because the word regret is about your feelings. And while it might be true that you regret your actions, apologies are not about your feelings. They are about the other person's feelings. So you always want to keep it about that other person and not just like, those apologies that are like, I regret doing this. I've lost sleep night after night. I feel so terrible. Okay, good to know. But this isn't really about you. This is about the person that you hurt. These are the subtle differences. So this website even has a section of artistic apologies.
Oh.
And in that section, I discovered this gem that I love so much. I'm absolutely obsessed. Marjorie Ingalls writes about a gallery show that she saw last year called Mistakes Were Made by the artist Jennifer Dalton. And, I think we've talked about this on an episode before, Suze. I love the phrase. It was the title of a book I bought just based on the title alone. Mistakes were made, but not by me.
That's right.
Fucking love it. Mistakes were made by not by me. I've been obsessed with that phrase and the way it takes zero responsibility for anything. So mistakes were made. If I saw a gallery show with that title, I would be like, oh my God, count me in. Where do I buy my ticket? Where do I buy my merch? I am all about this. And as I got into it, Suze, there's something about this exhibit that I think is going to tickle you as well. And you even mentioned it earlier. So it's so beautiful and serendipitous. So the gallery show was in a small gallery in Germantown, New York called Mother-in-Laws. And the whole aesthetic was kind of like a cabin set up like a Hallmark store. As you approached it, there were apology themed doormats like the house was clean yesterday. Sorry you missed it. And sorry if you trip over my wiener, with a picture of a little Dachshund, like a little dog.
Aw.
How cute is that? And then when you go inside, there are apology themed tchotchkes everywhere, like tote bags that say tote sorry. And then there are the signs. There was a wall of art that quotes real celebrity apologies from people like Bill Clinton, Lance Armstrong, Kevin Spacey, Jeffrey Toobin, and so many more. And you kind of have to jog your memory as to who said what. For example, Bill Clinton's apology included the line, "I gave in to my shame." But to add another layer of genius to this whole exhibit, the artist Jennifer Dalton, the signs that she created are made in that faux authentic vibe, like those signs that you buy at Target or Michael's or on Amazon that are made to look like they are handcrafted.
Yes.
They're your favorite, Suze.
Live, laugh, love.
They are the live, laugh, love fonts.
Baby.
And so she made them in this aesthetic with that sort of like bridesmaid script fonts and similar fonts like that.
Yes.
According to the press release for the exhibit, Dalton said she was interested in the faux artisanal aesthetic of a product that has handmade printed on its packaging meets the fake sincerity and false warmth of words composed by crisis managers. So she put these two things together, like these false apologies with false artisanal aesthetics. Dalton told Sorry Watch, "I need to go in towards the thing that bothers me." And to that we say, fuck yes. She said, and this aesthetic has been really bothering me. This rustic wood thing in your Airbnb that someone bought at Michael's feels of a piece with the fake sentimentality of the horrible looping wedding font. It's this sanctioned way for any sentiment to look cute. And I was thinking about why I hated that font so much. And then there was the fakeness and the sameness of public apologies, this we need to be authentic and our true self thing, but then it's all the same. I'm interested in faux sincerity in both form and content.
This tickles me. This is a really funny idea.
Do you know what I mean? You can see why I'm obsessed.
Yes, Jennifer Dalton.
Jennifer Dalton, if you are out there, we are fans. We are fans. All of this leads into my what do we make of it? And I've already said a few things, and so have you, but this spark really could go on and on. Like the recent political landscape and the rise of people who believe in and take pride in the fact that they never apologize, that apologizing is weak, or the ever-present sorry, not sorry cultural phenomenon, or the trope of women who over-apologize. I have been guilty of this. I told you the story, I think, on the podcast of basically being told not to apologize for things that I wasn't responsible for because essentially not everything is about you. I think I told you that story. I will never forget it. But essentially, apologies or lack of apologies are trending. Like they're everywhere you look.
Yeah.
And in the cancel culture, the way someone apologizes or not is a test. It's a moment where sincere and authentic taking of responsibility is called for. And yet all eyes are on people like, how are they going to apologize? All of this like just adds up to sparks galore, in my opinion. So as I mentioned before, if you're a writer, consider what your characters might apologize for or not. What would be the hardest thing for them to apologize for? Make it difficult for them to apologize. Like make it the apology like a twist in the gut, and they can either do it or not do it. And that's information about this character.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting to me watching someone grapple through, I know I need to apologize, but also I really want to be right about this. That's high drama.
Yeah.
To me, like that is high drama. Or the character who is looking for an apology, but cannot state directly or clearly what it is they're upset about. The passive aggressive victim, that could be high comedy. Or do like Jennifer Dalton did and make art out of false apologies, apologies we've gotten or not gotten, apologies we've personally failed at and would like to do over. There's apology songs and apology poems, so many opportunities to be inspired by apology. Personally, I have to say, I've been sparked to write a few apology letters to people who I feel I need to apologize to. And I may not ever send them, who knows?
Uh-huh.
But I do think having that do over moment could be cathartic.
Uh-huh.
So, as I read on Sorry Watch, does an apology erase the past? Of course not. But an apology still has value. A good one can help people who are hurt and angry feel better. That's not nothing. And a good apology actually can be restorative to those hurt, to bystanders, to the person who did wrong, and even to the wider world. Suze, I truly intended to give you a wrap up of this spark that would be super inspirational and divine, but I simply ran out of time. So I'll be over here crafting the perfect apology to you and our listeners. I'll get it to you soon.
I can't wait to hear, and maybe more appropriately off mic, a little bit more about who you feel like you have stuff to clean up with.
Oh, so I'll do it. I'll tell you all about it. Yeah.
Yeah. You know how we were talking about how forgiveness is something, it happens inside of us and it's for us.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think to a certain extent, apologies are that as well. They're for us, but they're also for the other person. So,
Right.
do you know what I mean?
I do. I do. Like, I think an apology is an opportunity for you to live up to the kind of person you want to be or the kind of person you see yourself as. If you can truly apologize for a moment when you didn't live up to it. You're like, I failed myself in that moment and I failed this person. But I think these things that I've read recently for this spark were really about how in that moment of apology, if you cannot make it about yourself at all, it's really about the other person's feelings. But you can't deny, I think, that we become better people when we step up to the plate in that moment. It's for us too.
Here's where I get a little bit hung up. I get a little bit hung up in that space that we were just talking about, where I have a pretty healthy suspicion that there's something in that person that I'm like, this does not have a lot to do with me.
Mm-hmm.
So I can offer my apology for my part of this situation. But I think where I get hung up is where their behavior then is such that I'm like, now I'd like an apology from you for taking this out on me when I suspect it might not have anything to do with me. I get tripped up by that. And all of that is to say, life is not the movies. Life is not a TV show. Life is not even a kindergarten classroom where things are more clear cut and black and white and conflict can be resolved and we can have the denouement, in a tidy little package. Sometimes in our adult world, these things are more complex and nuanced. They're complicated and they're very shaded. It's just not as clean cut. But what I am taking away from you is in the process of apologizing, there's a time where it's like, in so much as you are able to sort of take your feelings, your hurt, your explanations, like set that to the side and just a clean, healthy apology to the apology receiver, whatever you call that. And then maybe you deal with the other stuff later.
Well, I think that in an ideal world, both people would have equal amounts of self reflection.
Mm.
And I mean, sometimes I suppose it's incredibly clear that one person did nothing wrong, like they're the picture of perfection, and the other person fucked up. All right, that could happen.
I think that example that I gave, the story that I told about that wedding invitation is really clear.
That's right.
Yeah.
And in that example, both people were able to come to the table. You were able to apologize. That person was able to receive it, forgive, and move on. But there are times that, like you're talking about in the more complicated, where it's like, yes, I behaved this way and I would like to apologize. I would like it to be unspoken and I don't have to mention that, like, you also engaged in some shady behavior. And it would be nice if you could self reflect and then come back at me and say, maybe the reason you did that is because I did this. And I also have some responsibility in this. And we could both apologize. That requires two people self reflecting and understanding the consequence of my behavior here may have caused your behavior there may have caused my behavior here, and on we go. And now we're trying to unravel it, and we both were a part of it, and we both need to do some forgiving, but we both need to do some apologizing. And I think that happens frequently, and we find out, are both parties willing to do that work or not? And sometimes they are, and sometimes they're not.
And sometimes, again, I suspect it's born out of pain. That
That's right.
It's sort of like it feels so hot to the touch. It feels so painful that until that pain is addressed and processed, that may be where it lands.
You're absolutely right. And that's what I was speaking of before. Like, it's psychologically unsafe. It doesn't feel safe to them because, for whatever, we don't know. We're not, have we mentioned we are not psychologists?
Right.
But there can be a fragile belief system that if one domino fell in their mind, it may trigger a whole bunch of things that they need to reevaluate.
Right.
And it is too painful.
Yeah.
So must keep that domino standing at all costs. That's all true too. That's all true too. And having that kind of compassion and forgiveness when you don't get an apology, I think is equally as important as learning how to apologize.
I love it.
Fun times. I can't believe
It
we just
is.
talked for an hour about apologies.
I could talk for another several hours about apologies. I really could. I'm very fascinated by this. I'm fascinated by movies. I've seen a movie as recently as this week where there were some really tidy apologies for big stuff. And I was like, would it were that simple that it could happen so succinctly in that brief scene.
Yeah.
And then this gorgeous denouement where there's a sense of freedom and release. And then I also think it's interesting to see it in creative work where it isn't like that. It is messy.
That's right.
Time passes, people go their own ways. I think that's interesting too.
I do too. It's all part of the complexity of being human.
Oh my God.
I'll take it.
Laura,
Yeah,
I like that.
I like that too. More conversation off mic.
Amen. Sorry, listeners. This is where you step off, and I guess that's it. This episode of the Spark File was made on the lands of the Lenape people, and as always, we hope that it put another bunch of sparks in your file. If there is a spark you'd like us to explore, or if you'd like to learn more about how to coach with us to bring your creative ideas to life, email us at thesparkfile@gmail.com or submit it through our website, thesparkfile.com.
We'll even take your feedback, but you know the price of admission. First, you have to share a creative risk that you've taken recently.
Follow us on social at The Spark File, and be sure to subscribe, rate, and 5-star review this podcast. It really does help other listeners to find us. Also, if you like this podcast, we hope that you will share it with people that you love. And if you didn't like it, sorry.
Oh! I like what you did there.
Ah.
If something lights you up and gets your creative sparks flying, we are writing you a forever permission slip to make that thing that has been knocking at your door. Come on now. It's your turn to take that spark and fan it into a flame.
You know, you got to take it
And make it.
Bye.
Bye.
Sorry. You know what we're obsessed with? That it was a pre-recorded message on phone machines when a line had been disconnected in New York that went boo doo doo. We're sorry. This call. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes. We're
That
sorry.
guy's voice. We're sorry. And like some old phone technician had recorded it, and for years.
Yes.
Boo-doo-doo.
This
We're
line has been
sorry.
disconnected.
We'll leave you with that.
When I bump into something that inspires me, I dump it in my spark file. Could be something that I wanna make or how I wanna be. I pump it in my spark file. I jump into my spark file. Let's open up the spark file.
Hi, friends. Susan Blackwell from the Spark File here to let you know that the doors are open for the Spark File Illume, a 9-month group creativity coaching mastermind that invites you to be the chief creative officer and chief marketing officer of your creativity. But what does that mean? That means in 9 months in Illume, you will clarify and advance your big creative goals and learn how to effectively share your work with the world. Now, if you're listening to this and you're an experienced creative or an accomplished professional who seeks a space where it is safe to attempt something you've never tried before, or complete a big creative project, or take your work to the next level and acquire the skills needed to share your creative work with the world, Illume might be right for you. We are calling in emotionally intelligent, high-functioning creatives who are ready to level up. You can find out more by going to thesparkfile.com/Illume, but do it now to find out if Illume is right for you and to save with early bird discounts. That's thesparkfile.com/Illume. Take a leap, take a risk. Go to thesparkfile.com/Illume and join us for Illume.